On Sunday, streets filled with people laying palm branches, shouting for a new king. By Friday, that same crowd shouted for his death. If we set aside the religious context, what remains is a raw observation of how a collective mind can be unraveled and rebuilt in a matter of days. This timeline tracks the shift across 120 hours. It follows the movement from the peak of public adoration down to the finality of an execution. How does a city reach this kind of breaking point so quickly? What drives thousands of people to turn on a hero they were just celebrating? We like to think we would have been the exception, but social psychology suggests that in the heat of that moment, almost all of us would have joined the chant. The week began with the crowd projecting their own specific needs onto a leader. They wanted a military conqueror who would drive out the Roman occupiers, and they saw exactly what they wanted to see. The tension began when the leader challenged the local religious system instead of Rome. Expectation collides with reality, creating cognitive dissonance. That friction fractures the bond between crowd and leader, as they realize he was not who they imagined. When a group feels let down by a figurehead, their previous devotion doesn't usually fade away. It transforms into a sharp sense of resentment. Adoration is often conditional. The moment a leader stops reflecting the crowd's immediate desires, the crowd begins to look for a reason to turn. The breaking point came Thursday night. In a dark garden, the supposed conqueror was arrested. He offered no physical resistance. To a crowd valuing strength above all else, seeing their leader in ropes was a devastating blow. His authority vanished the moment he appeared powerless. That sudden loss of a central figure created a massive psychological vacuum in the middle of a high-tension week. With the leader gone, the crowd was left with their own anxiety. They were afraid of the Romans and the high priests, and in that state of fear, they were desperate for a new direction. By Friday morning, the assembly was highly curated. The religious leadership used sample bias, ensuring that their most dedicated and vocal supporters were positioned at the very front of the courtyard. They relied on authority bias. When the high priests, the recognized experts, condemned the prisoner, the people deferred to that status rather than their own judgment. In high-pressure environments, anger behaves like a thermal wave. This emotional contagion starts with front-row agitators and rapidly spreads. As emotions escalate, individuals merge into a single entity. This is deindividuation, losing your sense of self to the collective will. In this state, a diffusion of responsibility occurs. You feel that because everyone is shouting for a death, no single person, including yourself, is responsible for what happens next. The rhythmic chanting of crucify serves a biological purpose. It bypasses the logical parts of the brain and speaks directly to the primitive amygdala, which handles our most basic emotional responses. By the time the verdict was reached, the individual citizens were gone. Only the group mind remained, driven by a singular, violent purpose. Psychologist Carl Jung suggested that mobs often tap into deep, ancient archetypes. In this case, the city focused all its collective anxiety onto a sacrificial lamb to restore a temporary sense of order. But when the peak of the emotion passes, the afterburn begins. It is the process of waking up and realizing the weight of what you allowed the crowd to do in your name. While our tools have changed over the centuries, the way our brains respond to a group has stayed the same. This visualization shows the mechanics of a digital funnel. It operates on the same logic as the Friday courtyard, separating people into groups and amplifying collective rage through a curated echo chamber. The only way to resist that pressure is through individual critical thinking. It requires the willingness to stand in silence, even when the rest of the world is shouting. Conviction is fragile. The story of the turning tide serves as a warning. When the crowd around you demands blood, who are you?